Hello and welcome to this webinar from magplus, 5 Lessons of Digital Publishing. I'm Mike Haney, and I should mention as we get started here that this is actually a pre-recorded webinar. I'm recording this the day before you're watching it. And right now as you're watching it, I'm actually in the live chat. So if you have questions as we're going through this, questions, feedback, you want to just yell at me, I'm over in the live chat and I'll be answering that directly as we go through. To get started, just a little bit on me. If you've watched any of our tutorial videos or previous webinars, you've probably heard my voice, so now you can see a picture of me looking like a angry lumberjack. I'm the Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of magplus, just means I've been with the project since really the very beginning. And currently most of what I do is talk to customers and clients and potential clients and sometimes competitors and former clients to just try to decide where the platform should go, what we need to do to make this a more useful and better platform. My background is in editorial and graphic design before that, so I really do come from the client side of this. I don't come from software. That's how I came into the project, was representing the editorial side. And I still try to keep my toes in that water a little bit, so I'm a contributing editor at a couple of magazines still. Before we get into the actual lessons, I want to just start by sort of setting the stage a little bit about where I think we are in this evolution. I know this is a little bit of a cliched graphic, but I think it's kind of a useful one for thinking about where we are in the spectrum. I would argue we're about here. That is to say, we're just starting to figure out how to walk upright. This is very early days, and I know we said that 2 years ago and we said it last year, but it's still true. It's still early days. The web was still early in 1996 as it was in 95 and 94. That's really clear to us now. In 1996 and 97, we thought, boy, we should have this internet thing figured out. To kind of illustrate that point, there's a quote that I really love to use, that kind of analogy between where we are now within this tablet, app, touchscreen, mobile ecosystem and where we were with the web 15 or 20 years ago. This is a quote, and I'll just read it here. Visionaries see a future of telecommuting workers, interactive libraries, and multimedia classrooms. They speak of electronic town meetings and virtual communities. Commerce and business will shift from offices and malls to networks and modems, and the freedom of digital networks will make government more democratic. Baloney. This was from a Newsweek, kind of ironic, Newsweek cover story from 1995 called The Internet, Bah. Now, this wasn't exactly a mainstream opinion at the time. This was trying to be a little bit controversial, but it wasn't completely insane either. It was completely legitimate at that point to make a case that all of these things, which are now, of course, exactly what the internet has turned out to be, was a fantasy. So I think about this anytime I read an article or I get in a discussion with someone who goes, publishing on iPads has failed, it just doesn't work. I think anybody who says that is not really taking the long view and has maybe checked out of this a little earlier than they should have. It's certainly too soon to know what works and what doesn't long term. Of course, we've learned some lessons, but let's not dismiss an entire ecosystem just now because we didn't make $1 million the first 3 months we went out. One more quote that's slightly more modern. This actually I just saw this week in an article. This was apparently from a memo that Justin Smith, who was previously at The Atlantic, which we'll talk about a little later, and is now running digital things over for Bloomberg. This is from a memo he sent out to his staff there, and I thought it was a great quote. I think it really sets the stage nicely. The media industry is bifurcated into two distinct worlds: the struggling traditional segment that longs for a simpler, more profitable past that will never return, and the vibrant entrepreneurial segment that is reinventing the industry before our eyes. The simple act of choosing to live on the new wide-open frontier is a powerful step toward success. And what I love about this is a guy who transformed The Atlantic, right? 165-year-old brand that specializes in long-form storytelling, feature stories, news. This is not Mark Zuckerberg saying this quote, right? This is somebody who's turned around a very traditional brand, and I think him saying, just choose to live in this new wide open frontier, choose to accept it, that we're in a new world. The rules have changed, the way things worked even 5 years ago simply don't exist anymore. It's time to start thinking more broadly. If we can do that, I think that's a great, as he says, a great powerful step toward success. So I'm just going to briefly touch over on what magplus is before we kind of dive into these 5 lessons. If you're coming to this webinar, maybe you're already familiar with us, but maybe you've just sort of found this some other way. So we're a full publishing ecosystem for designing and distributing content through apps on touchscreen devices. I think that's a really kind of a mouthful, but it's a good summary. So we're a full publishing ecosystem. By that we mean We have creative tools that you can use to design your stuff. We have a web-based distribution center where you can upload your stuff. And then we have a white label app business, white label apps for all sorts of devices where you can distribute your stuff off to people. So it really is all pieces of the system. And we really only work on apps and on touchscreen devices. We don't do anything out on the web. We're not trying to be a CMS at the same time. Our focus is really custom design for these new touchscreen mobile devices and publishing through apps. So you can read all the other bullet points here. A little bit of history. I mentioned I came out of editorial. This project, the company magplus, actually started as an R&D project within Bonnier, Popular Science's parent publishing company, which is a 200-year-old family-owned Swedish-based company that has media properties all over the world. So we began as an R&D project, really just thinking about what should we do for ourselves as a media company about this new generation of devices that was clearly coming. And the great thing about starting this early and in R&D is we got to do a lot of research and testing to kind of figure out that vision so that when the iPad launched in 2010, we were there on day one with our first stab at a vision for what this could be, and that was the Popular Science Plus app. Then in 2011, after some refining and learning a little bit more, we spun off the project. We spun off the whole platform into an independent company called magplus, where we started selling what we had built to other people. Now, fast forward a couple of years, we've got more than 1,500 apps out there. We're probably now more about 4 or 5 million installed apps. And we're about 35 people, and we have offices both here in New York, where I am, and in Stockholm, where some of my colleagues are, and kind of handling Western Europe, and a few other partners around the world as well. So really a lot of growth in the last couple of years. And as you'll see here, a lot of really phenomenal clients. I couldn't be prouder of the work that so many of our clients are doing. Great design, great business ideas, great digital content, interaction. We'll talk more about some of these as we go on. And as I say, more than 1,500 apps out there. How it works is that we're, on the creation side, we're an InDesign-based tool set. So again, we really want to speak to those designers who are already out there thinking about layout, thinking about design. Now we're just going to give them a new canvas to work on. So instead of print, they're going to work on this infinite touchscreen canvas of phones and tablets. So we really give you a blank canvas. You design whatever you want. You can preview it immediately as you're working on your device. Really important when you're designing for this kind of an interactive touchscreen environment. You have to see and feel how it's going to work. When you're finished, you simply upload the file you've made to our website, and boom, that makes it available in your custom white label branded app. So when you put your app out there, it doesn't say magplus, it's your app with your branding. And you're publishing through to it. We're just a tool set. You really don't need to interact with us once you've signed up, and once we get you going, away you go, and we do kind of stay out of your way and just let you go. And of course, we publish out to App Store, Newsstand, Google Play, and Amazon as well. The app itself, a useful way to sort of think about this, and many of the apps work this way, not just our system, but others, is really there's two parts. The app itself is sort of a container. Think of it almost like your personal newsstand, where you can publish issues through to that app. So once you've got your app approved and out there live in the store, you can publish whatever you want, and boom, it just appears out in the app. That's how the issues, the content gets to your users. As I mentioned, we support a number of different devices, both tablets, but also we've been on phones now for probably a year and a half, both Android and iPhones. Lots of really great, exciting stuff happening in the smartphone publishing space. We'll show a few examples later. And of course, Kindle Fire as well, which is a really, really great tablet. So briefly, our pricing. The key thing to know about our pricing is really just that we don't differentiate by features or by functions of the app at our different price points. Everybody who signs up with us gets all the same features. The creative toolset's free for everyone, the full featured creative toolset. And then the white label app, which is what you sort of ultimately actually pay for. Again, all the features you can do at any price point. The only thing that differentiates the prices is how often you want to publish. So if you're only going to publish occasionally, you can pay us only when you publish, and that's $1,000 each time you publish. So if you're quarterly or twice a year, that's the way you want to go. If you're going to publish more frequently, you can just pay us a fixed monthly fee that's at $3.99 a month, and that allows you to publish as much as you want to that app that you have. So even if you're a daily, you can $3.99 fixed a month. And then we just introduced a sort of top tier plan. If you want to do a whole bunch of apps, you don't have to pay us $400 per app. You can just do a fixed $3,000 a month. You can publish as many apps, as many issues, as many devices, etc. It's really an all-you-can-eat. And another key part of our pricing is that there are no mandatory download fees. This is an aspect of this universe that can get kind of expensive, and that's because the way that all the app stores work, the issue files themselves, whether it's a magplus file or something else, has to be hosted somewhere other than the app store. The app stores will host your app, but that issue file has to live on a server somewhere else where it can be downloaded to the app, and that typically costs money. So the way we handle that is that we let you host those issues yourself. If you have your own server infrastructure, if you already have an Amazon account or a Heroku or any of the other providers out there, you can host yourself. You take care of paying those people whatever you need to pay them. We don't get involved. There's no cost to us. We provide hosting as a service because a lot of people don't have their own. We use Amazon S3, which is a major hosting provider for a whole bunch of the internet. A great global, robust system. And we basically charge you what they charge us with a little bit on top. So we put a little margin on there, but not much. So we charge 17 cents per gigabyte. So that's issues actually downloaded. So a way to think about that is if you have a 300 megabyte issue, every time somebody downloads that, 300 megabytes is going from the server to their device. So you're paying about 5 cents for that download because that's about a third of your 17 cents per gigabyte. If you compare that to a per issue kind of pricing, it can really result in a lot of savings over the years. So I just always encourage people when you're looking at pricing out different solutions, look at not just the license, but all the costs that are associated, because this can end up actually being a pretty significant cost out there. A couple other things I just want to mention before we move into lessons about magplus, a couple of unique things we do. About a year ago, we rolled out what we call an SDK. And if you don't know software and what SDK is, don't worry about it. All that really means is that instead of that white label app that the majority of our apps are using and that I mentioned before, instead of getting a sort of custom no coding app, you can code. You can, if you have your own iOS developers, you want to hire your own, we'll sell you a couple of the component pieces of magplus that allows you to continue to use our tools and our back end, but that actual app interface can be whatever you want it to be. So if you want to see a great example of this, go check out New York Magazine's app. It's just launched this spring. It's brilliant. It's one of the better apps that we've seen since the iPad came out. What's really great about it is that it's a combination of both a daily curated view of content from all their many great successful websites, as well as the magazine, again, beautifully redesigned for the tablet. So the app really mixes both together. It's the kind of app that you go back to every day, but then you also every week you get your great bonus of the digital magazine itself. So New York Mag worked with the Wonder Factory here in New York to create this really cool app design. magplus is sort of the engine underneath, but you'll see very quickly that their app looks quite different than most of the other magplus apps out there. That's because they use the SDK. Finally, the last thing I'll mention about the company is just that we also do have a division we call magplus Studios, in which we will do creative work for you. So because we come out of publishing, we've got a lot of publishing veterans in the company, we decided to this is an area we can help with. We know how to design in this system. We know kind of what works. We're good at translating brands through. So, if you're a little nervous about getting into this space, you don't want to just toss a new tool set and a blank template on your designers, you can hire us. We'll do the first few issues for you. Then we'll help train up your designers. We'll give them all the designed issues. It's just a really nice way to kind of ease into this space without feeling like it has to be so chaotic right away. On top of that, we can also do consulting, et cetera, kind of drawing on a lot of the lessons that we've learned over the few years doing this and our background in publishing. So let's dive into the lessons. Before I get into number one more slide I wanted to put up, and this is a little bit wonky and academic, and it's because I actually developed this for a class I taught at NYU last year. But I think it's a useful sort of equation. It's a useful way to think about this. So as you're thinking about your strategy, and that's really what I'm talking about today, are the things to consider as you're considering your app strategy, whether you already have an app out there or whether you're just thinking about getting into this space. I think a strategy is goals, and I think that's always where it needs to start. You need to figure out as an organization, what do you expect out of this app? Is it about driving revenue? Is it about expanding users? Is it about getting employees to engage more? Is it about giving your advertisers a new vehicle and driving new ad revenue? Set some goals for this app and figure out what will you consider a success. Is it getting a certain number of downloads? Is it getting featured in the Apple Store? Is it getting some press written about? What are your success metrics? Then look at, once you know kind of what you want to do, look at the content that you have, the content inventory. So this is not just the print magazine that you make every month. That's one set of content, but look at the web for content you have. Look at the archives. Look at partnerships you have. Look at any other sources by which you can pull together content that could go into your app. And as you're thinking about that, turn around and think about it from the other perspective. When you think about the audience that you want to get on this app, and that goes back to your goals, what content do they expect? Because what you might find is, oh, they might actually want a different kind of content that we don't have, but we can probably cheaply make it, or we can reorganize some resources we have now to make that, which leads to the last point of think really seriously as you're looking at this strategy about the resources you have. First, on the money side, this happens all the time that we talk to folks about what they want to do. And I say, what's your budget? And they go, well, as cheaply as possible. That's not a budget. You can't manage a project on as cheaply as possible. If it's $1,000, great. Then we know we got $1,000 to work with, and we'll figure out a solution within that. If it's 50,000, well, then we can do some slightly different things. But really make sure you have a budget, not just for launch, but for ongoing. What kind of maintenance are you going to have? Whether that's for license fees, additional creative, upgrades, etc. Really plan out a budget at least a year, ideally a couple of years moving forward if you can. But also on the resources side, look at the talent that you have in-house. Who do you have that can work on this, who wants to be involved in this project, and what kind of time are they going to have over time? So again, around a launch, everybody gets really excited. They'll put in the late nights, they'll work the weekends, but 4 months in, they're not going to want to do that anymore, probably. So really think about how you're going to deal with this moving forward. I think when you put those three things together, that starts to point to what your strategy should be, whether it's a replica, I hope not, a custom designed solution, maybe a completely native app, not even using a platform. If it is a platform, what platform is going to work right for you? Those are all questions that should go into determining what the strategy is. Here's a little simpler kind of visual, much less wonky way to think about this, but this is sort of where my head goes when I'm talking to brands, is I think in Venn diagrams, right? One world out there is your brand and everything that is associated with your brand, your goals, your content, your audience. The other is the world of apps, right? And that's what we're talking about today is apps. You could, of course, do this with the web as well. Here's what you're looking for. Where do those things overlap? That's where your app should live. What do people want to do in the app world? What's successful in the app world? What are apps good at? And where does that intersect with what your brand is good at and what your audience wants and what your organization can produce? So, leads us nicely into, should we be doing an app at all? We get this question a lot. Well, should I do an app? Should I do a website? Well, of course you should do both. And sometimes I understand you may have to prioritize and do one first, and that's something you really have to look at as part of that strategy. But let's get past this idea that apps are a fad. I think that's a largely discounted idea by now. I understand a couple of years ago there was a legitimate debate, but apps really are not a passing thing. Apps are the new paradigm for how people think about the actions they want to perform on these devices. To that point, here's a graph from Flurry, which is an analytics company, tracks what people do on their devices. 80% of the time people spend on these iOS and Android devices, they're in an app. They're not on the browser. Even though the browsers are pretty good on tablets, they're going into apps. And that's not necessarily because they love apps or they're wonky. It's because if I pick up my phone and I want to go to the Times, I want to read the news that day, I'm going to hit my Times button. I'm not going to open up my Safari button and then type in nytimes.com to get that experience. I know I'm going to get a better experience. The news is already going to be downloaded to my app. It's just easier for me to think about tapping that NY Times square that's there. And I think as we move forward, I'm also not suggesting the web is going to go away. I think it's both channels will live, and if anything, they'll marry a little bit. I sort of believe that my kids will not think about apps or the web. They'll think about what they want to do. They'll pick up their phone and say, I want to use Twitter or whatever it is at that point, and they'll go use Twitter. They won't say, I want to open my Twitter app or I want to go to twitter.com. So apps really are here to stay. It's the paradigm for what's being used. Windows new operating system is app-based. Mac is all app-based now in the Mac App Store. Of course, all the mobile devices are app-based. This is really the new paradigm for software. A few more stats to kind of illustrate that, just showing some of these trends. This is a really interesting one showing app downloads versus music downloads. So the iTunes Store, music store, we think about how successful that was, and then look at how much steeper the growth curve is for the app world. Here's another way to look at that. I really like this chart because this is sort of apples to apples. This is downloads however many months after that particular store launched. So you can see 2 years in, where the blue line song downloads were under 3 billion, app downloads were already at about 5 billion. just 2 years in, and then just barely 3 years in, it was at 15 billion, and I'll show you how much further we are along now. Here's another chart, just again looking at that growth. This is only up through January of this year. We go up through today, it's actually closer to 50 billion, and here's some other ways to look at this. 4.5 billion in iTunes revenue just in June, so that's how much money Apple made. I like this middle stat. $11 billion has been paid out to developers. Again, this is just iOS. I grabbed these because Apple released these numbers recently. If we add on Android, of course, these will get bigger. Just in the iOS world, $11 billion has been paid out to developers. Their 70% cut of everything they sell. So when you're thinking about that Venn diagram, when you put that apps one up there, put the number 11 billion in the middle of that circle. This is $11 billion economy that you want to be a part of in your brand. You don't want to ignore this. You want to find a way to get a piece of that 11 billion, whatever it is. And the way that you're going to do that is in this stat I love down in the lower right-hand corner. I always say I think the greatest thing that Steve Jobs left us was not the iPad or the iPhone or the Mac. It was 575 million credit cards on file, so that when people want to buy things in my app, they only have to tap once. They don't have to put in their credit card number and their address and their shipping address and their billing address. All they have to do is tap the buy button, and it's really easy. And so people spend a lot of money. That's why $11 billion has been paid out to developers. That's a boon for us. So what is the unique value of apps? I think this is an important thing to think about. Again, I'm not saying don't build a website, but I am saying there are things that apps do particularly well. They tend to be more immersive. They tend to be more designed because of the environment that they're operating in. They are a full screen experience. You're not trying to do 5 different things typically in an app the way that you are on a web page. And to kind of illustrate that, I've put here one of our clients' magazine we love, Garden and Gun, Southern Lifestyle Magazine. Here's the way that one of their stories from the magazine looked on their website. Here's the way that it looked, the exact same story in their tablet app. And you can see as you scroll down and get more into it. So again, much more immersive. I don't have all my other links over on the side. I don't have a big ad across the top. Lots of different promos going on. It's a more immersive, more designed experience. Much easier to monetize, again, to that point of credit cards on file, easy buy button, and expectation that this is a commerce environment in a way that can be much trickier on the web to monetize content. Works offline, which is really useful. Now, a lot of HTML5 things do that as well, but it's sort of a native function of apps. And of course, you get that greater experience control, and really it feels native to the device. You can see even when you look at here, this screenshot of this web story is from the tablet. So this is the tablet, how it looks on my tablet browser. That does not feel as native to this device as this does. This feels like I'm in an app. So it leads me nicely to my second point, which is in this environment, as you're looking at bringing your content to an app, you have to go native. And by that I mean a replica of what you did in print is largely not good enough. Now, you can find examples of people having some success with that, sure. But the reason I say that you have to go native is that everything else I can do on that device is native for it. So when you think about your competition in this space, it's not this. This is the newsstand, right? So in the print world, I walk into Barnes & Noble, I look at the racks of magazines, and that's my competition. Not so in the app world. In the app world, my competition is, sure, it's all the other magazines I could read and newspapers. It's also every single game I could play. It's also every single movie I could watch. It's also every single TV show I could watch. Any square that I can tap on that touchscreen is my competition for my publication, for my publishing app that I'm doing. So that publishing app, I'm not saying it has to have Angry Birds flown across it, but it better be an experience that is as rewarding and feels as native and is as nice and pleasant to use as all of these other things that are made native for the device. Angry Birds is on every single device, but every time it's on it, it's native to it. It's full screen on it. The touch screen work, the touch controls work for that device, etc. It's always native. So your experience has to be native as well. So what do I mean by that? When I talk about creating something native for the device, or I use a phrase like custom design, sometimes people get a little worried and they go, oh my gosh, I'm not Popular Science. I can't do a really fancy, highly interactive issue. It's not really about that. It's not about bells and whistles and exploding things and stuff coming at you. It's really just about thinking about the canvas and how it's different and how people use it and what it can do. So here's a page out of Shape Magazine, one of our clients, great client, having a lot of success out there. Standard workout page, really their bread and butter. out of the magazine. Here's what you could do if you just shrunk it down and put it on the tablet. Again, you can see this is not very satisfying. It's hard to read. Here's instead what they did on the tablet. So you can see it's not a huge layout change, but they made things a little bit bigger. They made them easier to read. And more importantly, they just made really simple little slideshows that showed the woman doing the actual exercise. So that's taking advantage of a capability this has. It's digital. You can have that kind of motion in there. It's not a hard thing to produce. It doesn't take much time. But suddenly this feels like somebody redesigned this so that I could enjoy it on the tablet. They didn't just dump a picture of their print page on here. Let's look at a couple more examples. Here's a standard front of book page, again, a department page. This is out of Popular Science. You can see I've got a fractional I got to contend with over on the left side, so I've crammed a whole bunch of elements on here. I've got an infographic at the bottom. It's kind of stuff down there. I've got a photograph that I clearly paid for, that I'm trying to use as big as I can while still getting all my words in there. Here's what I'm able to do with it on the tablet. I can blow up that photograph. Now I've got this vertical scrolling space I can use, so all the copy doesn't have to fit right next to that photo. It doesn't have to encumber it. I can expand on my infographic here a little bit, use, again, really nice piece there. Easier to understand when I've got this stuff spread out. So you can see this is not about movies and animations and crazy extra stuff. This is just layout. This is just thinking about how I'm taking that exact same material and presenting it in a smarter, more native way for this canvas. Let's look at one more example. This is a really old one, but I like to use it because I edited this page back when I was at Popular Science. So I remember the argument that I had with Matt, my designer at the time, who's now my magplus creative director, about, hey, I need more words on this page. Well, I need to run these images bigger. And you can see it's a pretty crowded looking page because we had that classic edit design debate. In the tablet space, we don't have to have that argument because it's an infinite canvas. Here I can take advantage of this scrolling. This is a touch screen. People want to touch it. They understand that they can move and tap and slide and do things with it. And it puts them in control. They get to decide how much of this they want to read. If they want to go a little further and see more of these things, they can turn off the text if they want and just look at these pictures. I can run things bigger. I can spread them out a little bit. That's what I mean about going native. And of course, from there, you can build into interactivity and links to websites and videos and all the other stuff. I just want to make the point that it doesn't have to start there. Being native is really just about thinking differently about the canvas. Here's one more example of native I want to show. So this is not a print publication. This is digital only. This is a digital-only fashion publication. It's free. It's called The Unlimited. It's made by an Israeli design firm, and it's probably my favorite design example of a magplus publication, really any digital publication. It's just brilliantly interactive. It's clearly a magazine. It's a curated issue, but it does things and has a feel that could only happen in digital and really only on a touchscreen. They're really great about taking advantage of this canvas. You can see it's just really interesting photography and video. And every issue is completely different, a whole new design, a whole new widgets. I highly encourage you to go check these guys out. It's The Unlimited. Search for it out in the iTunes store and check them out. They're also on the iPhone, really cool iPhone design. Third point I want to make is there is money here. And I know this is really the key thing, right? You might be hanging in with me on those first 2 points. Got it, Mike. We believe in apps. Okay, sure, we're happy to go native. But you know what? If we can't make money doing it, it doesn't matter because I know none of us are sitting on budgets that are, no magazines or companies are sitting on money they just don't know what to do with and are looking for places to pour it into. There has to be an ROI here. But there is revenue in this space. It's not replacing your print business yet in most cases. We'll look at examples where it's starting to move in that direction. But there is actual revenue here. You can do this and be profitable on an independent sort of P&L, and this can contribute to your bottom line. And really that's the point, is that when I talk about this being a new revenue stream, again, let's look at the web as an example. There was a time when, as magazines, we had a single revenue stream, which is probably advertising. Maybe we had some consumer marketing, but it was that print book. Then the web came along, and now, the really good, successful, the Atlantic, New York Magazine, many others, make money on the web. And the web is a legitimate contributor to the bottom line of that business. Think about the app ecosystem. The mobile ecosystem is the same way. This is a new channel, which is small now, but it's going to grow over time. As your print is probably going down a little bit, you're going to diversify your revenue streams to continue to make, hopefully make even more money. So here's just some statistics about engagement, because this is really a key part of why you're going to make money in this space, is that These devices are fantastic for engagement. This is the best platform advertisers have ever had. They have a big, beautiful canvas so they can do brand ads and display ads. It's highly interactive, so it can be engaging. People will spend time with it. They will take actions on it. It's highly measurable because it's digital, so we can know exactly what people did, what they tapped, how much time they spent, etc. And it's interactive in the sense that the customer, the user, the reader can interact with the brand. They can click to schedule a test drive. They can enter their email for more information. They can search for a dealer near them. All those functions can be easily built in to these native tablet apps. So these stats down at the bottom are from a recent study from GfK MRI about actions taken, the kinds of things people were spurred to do by these interactive ads. We have a lot of work to do, of course, on the infrastructure of advertising in this space. What are the metrics that matter? How are we going to price things? How are we going to traffic things? What's the formats? A lot of those questions still have to be worked out. A lot of great work going on. The MPA is doing some really great stuff now to move that conversation forward. But this space is going to come around in advertising, and there's going to be money here because it's just too great of a space and there's too many eyeballs for it not to be. So again, looking at the app, this is just straight app revenue. It's looking out in the future. You can, of course, dispute the 15, 16, 17 numbers, but just look at the trend even from 08, 9, 10, 11, 12, the line that we have here. A lot of money left to be made in this space. And same thing on the ad spending. This is really the direction advertising is going. Again, it's where the eyeballs are. It's where the people are. So the ad dollars are just going to follow it. We have a lot left to figure out about what that's going to look like and how it's going to work, and do banner ads work on the phone, and what are the networks and all of those things. But it will get sorted out because these are the kind of dollar figures that are attached to it if we can figure it out. And this is the kind of growth we're looking at. So money to be made. This is another really interesting point. One of the things that's happened in the last few years, certainly since the iPad launch, but even since the iPhone launch, is that apps have gone from being paid apps to really where the revenue is now coming from is the in-app purchases. This is very familiar to publications, which are often, again, that model I talked about early on. The app is the container, that's free. And then what I pay for is the content inside of the app. The good news about this trend line going up, that more and more revenue is coming from in-app purchases, is that that's a less foreign concept for people when they come to your publishing app. They're not frustrated anymore by saying, oh, it's a free app. I thought everything was going to be free. Certainly games are all about in-app revenue now. So people are becoming accustomed to this model, which again is perfect for the publishing space. And here's just a look at that, at some actual numbers on that in-app revenue. You're looking at a projection of 5.6 billion by 2015. Again, this is a big economy that you want to be a part of. So we've talked a lot about charts and numbers. Let's look at a couple of actual examples. This is one I really like, British Journal of Photography. I like these guys because they illustrate a couple of points. One, this is a global distribution system. Now you can limit it, doesn't have to be, but by default it's a global distribution system. So you look at a title like BJP, it's a niche title out of the UK. You can see it, it's 7,800 print readers. This is a small book. Now they've got 16,000 digital subscribers, so more than twice the number of digital subscribers they have in print, largely because they have a global impact now. The magazine's great, the content's universal. It's not just about Britain. So now you can see the 2,000 downloads a day in the US, good session times, and by building the website function into the app itself, they've doubled the traffic out to their website. So driving, again, more engagement, more users, more revenue out to the website. Let's look at one more example, also a photography-based one, but I like using this one, Pop Photo, because it's been on the platform for a while. It's another magplus title. But what's great about Pop Photo is, this is a relatively niche magazine. It's for, real photography geeks. And I like it when people talk about the fact that, apps don't work because you can get all the content you want on the web for free. Well, nowhere is that more true than the photography space. There are tons of great photography websites out there doing camera reviews and photography advice, etc. And yet, Pop Photo has 40,000 paid digital subscribers at $15 a year. Their total print rate base is about 350,000. So here you can see as an example of a title that's got more than 10% of its rate base digital, which means, and they are in fact getting, being AAM audited, including all the ads and meeting that AAM audit standard, so they can count these toward their rate base, which means they don't have to print that number of copies. So you think not just of the revenue they're making by that 40,000 subscribers netting $11 a piece, or $10 a piece, but also the savings by not printing 40,000 copies and having to distribute them. So, here's an example of a pretty niche publication in a crowded field that is making money. It's more than profitable on the platform when you take the license fees and the design stuff that they have to do, doing a really nice job out there with it. So hopefully an inspirational case. The fourth point I want to make, and this is a really big one, is to think beyond the magazine. Think beyond your magazine, but also think beyond the magazine format. Think about this as a new channel. Again, go back to that web metaphor. I'm sure that your magazines and companies were probably a lot like PopSci when I was there several years ago. And initially, all we did on the web was just put up content from the magazine. That's all we really thought about the web being. Now, of course, it's a whole ecosystem in and of itself. It has millions of users that don't overlap with the print users. It has its own voice. It has its own events and style of content that it does. Think about the mobile and the app ecosystem the same way. This is a unique space with unique users, unique capabilities. The example we're showing over here on the side is a really cool example. It's another free one you can go out and check out called WESC, We Are Superlative Conspiracy. It's a fashion brand, and they do these sort of catalog zines where it's a catalog. You can see I can buy things out of it, but it's also sort of a magazine. So they do a version both for both for the phone and for tablet. Really nicely interactive, really cool example of what you can do with the tools. So a couple of other points just to think about as you think beyond the magazine. I would say, especially if you're coming from a consumer magazine or a B2B, think about what you do well. Go back to those sort of basics of what magazines are great at, and that's delivering curated content to a focused audience. Shape knows how to put together an issue of content that their audience is going to like, that will delight and surprise them. Popular Science knows what that PopSci reader wants and who they are. So think about the same space in the app world. Who is your audience out there? What is the content that you can curate that will be satisfying to that audience? And as you're doing it, question everything from the business that you already have. Price doesn't have to be the same. Frequency doesn't have to be the same. The size of issues doesn't have to be the same. This can really be a unique channel. So let's look at some examples of that. This is one I really like. This is a new app that PopSci is just kind of trying out, doing some tests with, called PopSci Audio. So when I was an editor there years ago, we struggled to figure out how are we going to put this magazine on the iPhone. We wanted to do it, technology magazine, trying to be very forward. But we're a magazine, we were a magazine, still are, they still are, a magazine full of complex infographics and lots of very detailed information. And how do you squish that down to a tiny screen? So what I love about Popular Science's audio is it's an example of that strategy thing I talked about in the beginning, where they said, let's look at the Venn diagram of the iPhone. What do people use it for? What's it good at? And then what do we have? What's that intersection? It's not putting the print magazine on the phone. Instead, what Popular Science Audio is smaller issues made up of 2 or 3 stories out of that month's magazine that they pulled out, a feature, maybe a couple of departments, formatted in a really easy to read format for the iPhone, but also recorded. So they record their editor-in-chief or somebody else reading the story, and takes advantage of the audio function that's part of the magplus system. We have a built-in audio player you can use, and the fact that people listen to podcasts on their phone, right? They listen to things, they put their headphones in on the subway or at the gym, and they listen to stuff. So here, I can get these issues automatically downloaded to me because this is a newsstand app. So I know when I go to the gym, I can open up the most recent PopSci Audio, and I can just listen to these stories being read while my phone goes in my pocket.
November issue of Popular Science magazine. How the science of tribology could smooth the way to a better energy system.
So you can see there what they've done. Really simple formatting, nice little graphic, easy to read. Cool example out there. Here's another one I really love. This came out of the Chicago Tribune. This came about a year and a half ago, maybe a couple years ago now. And I have to say, when this idea came in, it was the first time that I really started to think about what could be done in this space independent than what had been done in print. It's because this magazine, the Bulletin, doesn't exist in print. It couldn't exist in print. The economics would never work. What this is the Tribune company realized that they were covering all these sporting events for their local markets, for the paper, and for their websites, and they had all this great material that they could easily turn into a Bulls magazine, but you couldn't justify printing and distributing and doing a consumer marketing campaign around a Bulls magazine. It would just be too expensive. In the digital space, as a tablet or a phone magazine, we can do this very, very cheaply. Our startup costs are virtually nothing. Our distribution costs are virtually nothing. So all they needed to do is figure out a way to be able to make these issues very quickly so that as soon as the game is over, they can put together this issue with the content they have, the story about the game, the images that they've taken. Again, great canvas for big, beautiful images, the stats, links out to the website. So if I'm a Bulls fan, I know when I wake up the next morning or even that night, I'm going to have this issue, again, automatically delivered, waiting for me on my device. It's going to sum up the game the night before. And it's a different experience than heading out to the website and just reading the story. Here I've got this nice immersive issue about that game. And now they've expanded this idea out to other sports teams as well. So again, a great example of something that can only work in the digital space. I mentioned before the Atlantic. We just love what this brand has been doing. Really smart stuff. So they got great web properties, wonderful print magazine. Now they've launched the Atlantic Weekly. That's the app they're doing with us. And it's a really cool experiment. Basically, the idea is, look, there's a ton of great content out on their various web properties every week. But, most people, probably like me, can't keep up with it all. I visit their sites regularly, but I miss things. So what I love about the Atlantic Weekly is this is a curated edition of the best of what's been on their sites that week. It's a what are the must-read stories. I know that this is going to be delivered to me every week. So the day after it's published, I can open up my phone on the subway or at the gym, and I can know that I'm going to have some great stories there to read. And maybe a couple of them I already saw, but maybe a number of them I missed on the site. A number of other titles are trying this. Esquire came out with a weekly. They're not a magplus client, but it's another cool example of that. The Pop Size is another example of people, again, playing with frequency, playing with what the content can be, looking at the content you have and how else you can package that together. So go check out Atlantic Weekly as well. And finally, sort of as we were just talking about, don't just think about thinking beyond the magazine on the edit side, but also think about it from a business perspective. Your ad strategy doesn't have to be the same as your ad strategy in print. You don't have to include every print ad and be audited by the AAM. You only need to do that if you want to count that circulation toward your rate base. But if you're making rate base in print, or if your digital circulation is small, why bother doing that? Why not try to use the ad space in your app to generate incremental revenue? Maybe that's by selling a sponsorship. Some titles out there, a few titles doing that really smartly. Maybe it's by upselling certain advertisers. Again, those advertisers maybe you have good relationships with. If you're an endemic book or you've got good client relationships, maybe you can upsell them to do a digital native ad that has better engagement on it. Make it part of a larger buy. Don't just default to the notion that you have to include everything that was in print, because again, that's going to limit you to thinking about this only as another channel for your print magazine. Think about your consumer marketing the same way. A subscription doesn't just have to be the 12 issues that you're already making in print. Maybe there's a super subscription where, in addition to those 12 issues, you get 4 SIPs. Maybe those SIPs are ones you already produce in the print world, but maybe they're digital only that you make because it's cheap to do so in this space. Maybe they're archival material. Maybe they're SIPs that you've sold to a sponsor, you've done as a marketing campaign with one of your clients. Outside Magazine's been doing a great job of this, making really cool, really useful, fun to read SIPs and working with sponsors to do it. They just did one around, a few months ago, they did one around dogs. So content they had, new content, all stories about dogs, sponsored by Eukanuba, or Eukanuba as a single sponsor. Really smart ideas. The other thing that you can start to include in these, using a new function we actually just announced this week called App Boy, is you can build a news channel, a news and alerts channel, or sort of daily news feed into your app. And there's no reason that you can't make that a subscriber benefit. So maybe my super subscription is my 12 issues and a daily news feed, because with AppBoy, and I'll talk more about it later, you can segment what part of your app audience gets this news feed. So you can say, I only want subscribers to see these news items, which means I can make that a subscriber-only benefit. Again, it starts to think about breaking up that frequency, finding more touch points for the users, etc. One last point about thinking beyond the magazine. I just want to throw out another example. Look at a show like Breaking Bad. So we talk about issues, and we are an issue-based platform, unabashedly. We believe in the issue as a content unit. But an issue doesn't just have to be, photos and text with maybe a movie thrown in. An issue could be a collection of movies. It could be a collection of audio, as we saw in the PopSci audio example. It could be all three. And it doesn't just have to come out of the print mag. It can be any bundle of content that's useful. So again, let's think about Breaking Bad, and let's think if it wasn't just a show, what if it was a newsstand app? What if each episode were an issue? And what if you said it, again, it's a newsstand app, so I can have it automatically delivered to my subscribers. And what if you promised to do that before they could see it on AMC? Every issue they got to see first. And then you sold that to a sponsor and said, you can be the exclusive sponsor inside of this app, which is going to be for super hardcore fans. And think about the craziness around these last episodes and how nuts everybody is about seeing. You could charge a fortune for this privilege of giving people content a little bit early. Plus, think of all the extras you could put in there, because this is still an issue. So I could have slideshows of behind-the-scenes content. I could have interviews with the cast and the creators. Vince Gilligan could give a summary you could do a 30-second video of Vince Gilligan talking about the episode afterwards. People would love that. You could do plot summaries of the previous episodes to bring you up to speed. So every issue could be like a little event, and it could have the actual show, because of course we can embed it in video inside an issue. We can even embed a streaming video inside of an issue. So you could make an issue around a particular event. It's about thinking about issues as bundles of content and thinking about, again, what is the value that you can bring in the app ecosystem with the newsstand and that capability, with the immersive experience that's there, with what audiences want, with the monetization tools you have. How can you put all that together and then find that intersecting Venn diagram? So I would argue, if you're Breaking Bad, you're selling episodes out on iTunes. I get that as individual episodes, but I look at Breaking Bad as a content brand, and I look at the app world, and here's one way to think about that Venn diagram intersection. If anybody goes and does this and makes $1 billion, please remember me. The last point I'm going to make, the last lesson here, is just what I'm saying here. This is an ongoing project, and I'll talk about this in a few aspects, but it's a really key point. We see over and over again in the 3 years we've been doing this, people come and they get very excited about doing this, and we have a lot of conversations, and they have good plans, and they launch their app. And then about 6 months later, we hear from them again, and we say, how's it going? And they go, well, we're really not sure. And we say, well, what have you been doing? And they go, well, we've just been making the magazine every month. That's not enough. You'd never launch a print brand that way. You'd never launch a print brand without a really detailed consumer marketing plan, without key performance metrics that you were going to measure and report back. And you wouldn't be able to do it without that, because somebody would have loaned you or given you the $5 million you needed to start that print brand, and they would want that kind of feedback. Think about your app in the same way. You're launching a new business, or at least launching a new title, and it needs to have that same kind of ongoing care and feeding. So a key part of that is analytics, which is what I'm showing here. These are just some slides from one of the analytics providers we work with, Localytics. We love them. They're great. They show all kinds of interesting, useful stuff. So analytics are a key way that you can understand what people are doing inside of your app. So things like retention, time spent per page, how many of my users are new versus returning, what part of the day are people using my app. These are all things that I can measure over time, pay attention to, and that will feed into how is my app working, am I being successful, what can I change to make it more successful. I can measure all kinds of sales data as well. This is a slide off of a service we love and we really encourage people to use, called App Annie. It's a service, and there are others like it. We just like these guys. They're free. They do a nice job. It takes all of the data out of your iTunes account or your Google Play account and puts it all together in really nice, easy to understand, easy to parse charts and graphs, and just a format that you can easily sort of examine it and look at how your apps are doing, and it stores it over time, and you can compare things against each other. Again, the service is free, so please, if you're not using a service like this, go sign up for App Annie, or Distimo Monitor is another very good one as well. So lots of data you can get out there. And the key thing I think about analytics is use it. I'm a big fan of appointing a particular person, whether it's a junior editor, whether it's somebody from your consumer marketing department, whether it's somebody on your publishing side. Make somebody the analytics guru. Make sure that they know what you can capture, where you can capture it, and that they go look every week or every couple of weeks and look at the key things that you've decided are the metrics you want to follow, because the same person looking at it over time will see trends. They'll see what's happening, where things are going up or going down, and then put together a report and share it with every stakeholder on the project, right? Share it with the people, the designers who are making the issue, with the boss who's signing off on the budget for it, with each of the departments that's involved. It's a very human thing that when we see a score on something, we want to improve that score. So it's a great way to get people to feel more ownership in this app project. Again, treat it like an ongoing project where they want it to succeed. Analytics can be a really key thing for that. So I've just listed a few examples here of some. There's a lot of things you can track, but these are ones I like. The links clicked is one in particular that a lot of people overlook. So in pretty much any analytics system, whether it's Omniture, or Flurry, Localytics, etc., you can track anytime the user taps the screen to do something, whether it's open a pop-up, play a movie, go to a web link, go to another page, you can track that tap. And as a designer who's trying to figure out this native design, that's super valuable information, because if I've put some really cool pop-ups on a page, but then I look at the analytics and see that, wow, 10,000 people viewed this page, but only 100 people tapped this link, that tells me that either the link wasn't very compelling or people didn't understand it was a link. Maybe they just missed it. They didn't realize they could tap there. That's the kind of information you want to feed into this ongoing, so that you know how to continuously improve, your project. Finally, I just want to mention Appboy. I mentioned them earlier. This is a new service. Again, we just rolled out this week. It's a third-party service that's built into the magplus apps. And in addition to the news feed that I showed you earlier, it also lets you send messages to particular segments of your audience based on things they've done. So it's kind of like taking the analytics piece, but then adding a messaging component onto it. There's a few ways you can send these messages. But here, for instance, you can see I've filtered out everybody who's downloaded exactly one issue and used the app more than 10 times. And I can see that's 830 of my 10,000 users. And now I can send a message to them. So I can say, everybody who's downloaded the app but never bought a subscription, or everybody who's bought a subscription but hasn't opened the app in the last 60 days. Now I can start to segment those users and speak directly with them. And why I mention this as part of this point is not just as an advertisement for Appboy, although we like them, but these kinds of services, this idea of what they call mobile relationship management, is an important sort of shift in thinking about this is not just a one-time event of a launch. This is an ongoing project. This is something that needs care and feeding. These are users that, just like in the print world, you're really good at getting people to resubscribe and to understanding why people have dropped their subscriptions. Bring that same kind of fervor to this environment as well, and tools like this are just a good way to do that. So the last thing I'll say here as I sign off is some words of wisdom we got from Jonas Bonnier when we first started this R&D project. Test. So this is the time to test. This is the time to go out and try things. We're still figuring it out. You can do things with our platform or others. You can get into the space pretty cheaply and try stuff out. You will either fail or succeed, right? It's one of the two. It's a binary outcome. And learn from what you did. Look at the analytics. Look at, pay close scrutiny to what happened and find out why you failed or succeeded, and then start the loop all over again. His last point was just, if you fail, fail quickly. And the nice thing is in this space, you can do that. So that's this webinar. I hope it was useful. We're going to record this. It's already recorded, rather. I hope we've had a lovely chat out in the live chat as you've been watching this. This will be up on the website if you want to go back and look at it again. And of course, we always have lots of tutorials, other webinars, great blog content out on magplus.com. If you're just trying to figure out what you're going to do in this space, use this as a resource to just kind of learn about it, even if we're not the platform you ultimately go with. But of course, we hope you do. So that's it for me signing off. Thanks very much.